Hey everyone, thanks for tuning back in for another episode of the Marketing Share, where marketing leaders go to learn what they need to know to run marketing. I'm Alec, and with me is my host, Barb. We are glad to be with you again. Uh, on this show, we cover various topics that we think marketing leaders need to know about and sometimes don't have an opportunity to learn about as you're coming up your own path of marketing, because there's so many areas in marketing to cover. So it's nearly impossible for one person to kind of be an expert at everything. So we like to bring in guests, just covering all the different aspects of marketing. And today, our guest is going to be a creative director from a marketing agency, because here's another example of something that, for me, for example, personally, I've never interacted or never had to use the services of a creative director. So we're going to cover that topic today. And Barb, let's introduce our guest. We have someone that's you've known for a while, and so we're excited to have him on the show.
Yeah, I started in the agency business, so scary as it is, today's advertising agency business is literally changing at the speed of light, right? And if you add in AI, now you get a mix that is so tough to actually navigate. And it's kind of like really interesting because it's changing so quickly. And charting the course of what you really need in an agency and in a great creative messaging is a huge job, right? So I have an old friend that we brought in, I ran into not too long ago, Matt Kuttan. Matt has served as a chief creative officer at several agencies. He's been all over the spectrum, actually. BBDO, Leo Burnett, DDB Needham, Peter Mayer, Saatchi and Saatchi. So you've been all over on big brands, right? QSR, you've got Wendy's, you've got McDonald's, you've done beverage, Coke, you've got Molson, Coors. I mean, amazing. And Lexus, Toyota, Verizon. I mean, what haven't you worked on? I'm kind of like, wow. Anyway, so excited to see you, Matt. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. That's right. We ran into each other about 2 months ago, and you're like, let's jump on this podcast. And I'm like, let's do it. So,
Yeah, love it. Love it. Okay, so we obviously have new marketing leaders as audience and a whole host of folks in the marketing field. For those who don't know or don't work with an agency really closely, talk about the role of a chief creative officer or creative director and really how it's changed over time.
cool. Well, the easiest way to describe it is probably the conductor. Uh, Having come up through the ranks of music, and the conductor becomes one and has to know all the instruments. So, at an agency, a chief creative officer or a creative director is the one who coordinates all the different departments, including writing, art direction, design, bringing in strategy, working with the account teams, and also, going into production, like what is the music being chosen for a spot, or where is something going to run. So it's like really being the lead and making sure all the departments are fully functional and they are communicating with each other. But it's also, if you're the chief creative officer, you also have to have the lead creative vision for the agency. Like, what do you stand for? Like, what type of agency are you, and making sure that all the creative work, represents that. So it's pretty much the conductor of an orchestra, and that's what a chief creative officer does.
So Matt, what about the marketing agency, this industry, the world of marketing agencies? I'm assuming that, like most industries, things have changed. The marketing agencies of yesterday are not the same as they are today. I mean, the names obviously might be the same, but there's probably a lot of change going on in the industry. So can you tell us, like, what is it like? What should marketing leaders today know about the world of marketing agencies, and what do they need to understand?
Yes, I mean, there are some of the legendary agencies still around, like the Leo Burnett's, the BBDOs that Barbara mentioned. But it has evolved where a lot of, because of the advent, since COVID, a lot of smaller agencies have popped up. A lot of individuals can do bespoke work for an agent, for a client. So that's happening a lot more. So it's no longer let's go to one of the big dogs. Nowadays, clients can pick and choose what kind of agency they want. Do they want something that's moving at the speed of culture, like Barb was talking about? Like, is there like an agency like Mischief or Mojo Supermarket that's really good at fast turnaround, buzzworthy stuff? Or if you are a big brand like a Pfizer or a McDonald's, do you want to go to a bigger company, holding company, which has multiple arms so they can help you with everything? So yeah, right now I've noticed in the last 10 to 20 years, that a lot of clients are bifurcating the work, not just going with one powerhouse agency, and they are picking and choosing. And a lot of times, the people within the brands itself, like in the marketing department, they also have more acumen with what creativity is. So they can pick and choose as opposed to saying, hey, in the old days of let's go have a martini, 3 martini lunch with the head of this department and we're going to give them the $100 million account. That has actually changed. Now it's more like, hey, we want this for this. For this social media, we're going to go to the smaller agency. All right, we want this Super Bowl spot. We're going to just go to this one agency, which if you guys have been following, like there's local agencies like High Dive in Chicago that people go to them just for Super Bowl spots because they probably won 6 of the last 7 or 8 USA Today ad meters, right? So you can go to them for that, but then for your bigger accounts and you have a lot of work, with tons of social media or tons of, media you're buying, you can probably go to a Saatchi or a Burnett or, DDB. So people are, clients have gotten smarter. In the old days, you're with an account, you probably stuck with that agency or account for 10 to 20 years. Now the lifespan is a lot shorter. I would almost say like the pendulum has swung. It used to be totally with the agency side. We charge what we wanted. We know we had the account. We could like take more risks. But now clients are much more malleable to like, wait a minute, we want to do this with them, but I like the creative they do here. And they'll even like do jump balls. And in a way, it's tougher for agencies because there's a lot more jump balls and assignment based work as opposed to saying, hey, you've got this account for the next 5 years. So that is what I've seen changed a lot over the last 10, 20 years.
Okay. So in other words, I'm hearing you saying a lot more competitive. You have to really, even big agencies, you've got to be scrappy in order to kind of get the work and keep some of the work because they're going to split up the work as opposed to like it's not that probably the days of Mad Men. That's obviously a long time ago, right?
Yep, that's true. So sometimes bigger agencies do have smaller agencies within their network. So they'll be like, hey, maybe for this short thing, you want some PR buzzworthy stuff, go with this PR agency we have in our network. But the clients have gotten very, shrewd in terms of, I think we're going to use this for this. Who created this amazing campaign? Maybe we'll give them one assignment and see how they do. And that's happening all across the board. That's something I've seen. So yes, you have to stay on top of your, on your toes, on top of your game, because you have to like know what's happening and also be smart enough. You can't be self-satisfied. Oh, we've got this account. We have it for the next 5 years. We're going to hire 500 people up to work on it. You have to stay on top of it.
Matt, I mean, as a head of marketing or a VP of marketing, I've done both, right? Had one agency having the business or, use multiple agencies. And I will say it's kind of tough for a client actually, right? I mean, having to have multiple agencies managing that work and then having it come from one voice, I think that's kind of tough actually. Also, it's tough for one agency to be great at, so many disciplines. So, there's, puts and takes to that whole discussion for sure.
Yeah, I think what's happened is in the old days, the agency account lead would be like almost like the curator of the brand. But I think that again, pendulum has gone towards the clients more. So within the clients itself, you have different departments, different marketing heads for each brand, and they help navigate what's the best for their brand. In a way, it's fine because they're more selfish. Like, for example, if you're working on Molson Course, if somebody's got a line in Google, they will want an agency that perfectly fits their brand as opposed to a bigger brand from Miller Lite, right? So I think I can see why it is important to even have that competition within brands at a brand, so they'd be like, okay, so, and those account leads, I mean, those brand managers or junior brand managers can be keeping their ears with the chief, marketing officer saying, hey, we should go with this agency for this, but for this agency, we can, they're better at doing these bigger brands. So I see why that's happening. You're right though. It does create trauma. Is there like a central messaging that's coming across? So I think that the onus is upon all of us to like, even as agency side or creative officers, to make sure that, hey, okay, you're saying this at this conjuncture, but does it make sense to say it here? And we have to stay on top of that.
Yeah,
good point.
I
Good
think
point. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. But that also creates a little bit more opportunity for agencies, right? So if you can actually weave your way into a big P&G or something like that and capture a brand that's an up and comer who wants their own agency, it's actually an advantage for some agencies now,
I'm hearing
right?
a lot more of that. Yes. So I'm hearing a lot more, 5-person agencies, 10-person agencies getting a piece of the pie. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, one thing that doesn't change over time is great storytelling, right? So, I mean, talk about how you can do great storytelling today, tomorrow, how it continues on and it never ends, right? And how does that play into the creative products that you bring to
Yeah, I
market?
mean, there's a famous, it's a Maya Angelou quote, people will forget what you said, people forget what you did, people will never make you forget how you made them feel. I say that a lot during a lot of my presentations too. Like when I have travel clients, I'll say, people will forget that crazy, the airplane ride with the three kids screaming, flight delays. They'll forget how much you spent on that resort. They'll remember those memories when they go back. If you had a good memory, that's what people will remember, forget everything else. So yeah, so great storytelling comes from experiences, right? And I think when you tell a great story, one of the biggest things I tell my team when I brainstorm with them or when I brief them is, listen, be like a capturer of stories. Like talk to your grandparents or your cousins or your neighbors, or don't just talk about, bogus stuff. Just talk about like what happened to them, or imagine experiences that happened to your aunt when she was young. All those stories can be manifested again creatively. Like some of the greatest stories and greatest spots you've seen, when I've talked to the creatives behind it, they've said, oh, you know what? That actually happened to my friend. Or I was at a bar and my friend told me the story and I put that into a spot. Now it's this famous national campaign, whether it's for Budweiser or for McDonald's. And I personally will tell you, I did a spot for Allstate exactly 10 years ago in 2014. And the spot was literally that happened to me as a child. And that made it into $1 million spot for Allstate. So you just don't know where the stories can come, and you can tap into your own past or something you've heard from friends or family. So yeah, so storytelling is still a key part. I mean, it's still about, they talk about data, 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 AI, 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 AI. But the greatest stories that people remember is like, hey, wait a minute, I felt that, or I know that happened to somebody, or oh my, that made me smile, or that made me cry. So I think storytelling is still humankind's biggest asset, and that's what always comes across with great advertising. You know?
So is that what you go to an agency for, right? Is it the storytelling? Is that the skill set that, like if I'm a marketer, I'm like, hey, I need help telling my story. I'm sure there's budget and there's size, right? Maybe we can get into that. But I get the feeling that if you really want compelling storytelling and something that's really going to catch, someone's attention or go viral, maybe that's what you turn to an agency for still these days.
Yeah, I think so. Because also, agencies can bring the power of objectivity. Because a lot of in-house agencies now, as you know, there's a lot of in-house agencies.
Yeah.
They're so in the work and they have to sell one brand and they know everything about the brand. The greatest stories are the fringe stories, like if you just go right down the middle, like,
Hmm.
at bat and the ball comes down and you get a base hit right up the middle. That is just boring, simple. For the home runs, you got to take that risky swing. And I think that's why agencies are required still in this age, because they'll have like an objective team just look at something and say, did you try this or did you try that? Which, if you are in a brand too much, you cannot bring. That's why it is important to have an outside agency sometimes to just bring
Hmm.
that power of, you know, being far away at 10,000 feet and say, hey, maybe this is a good way. And you would never think of that if it's your own. I think that's why
Yeah.
you do need agencies still.
Yeah, I've run an in-house agency as well, and it is the same thing. You get too close to the brand, don't you? Sometimes,
Yeah.
you're so living it day in, day out, you may forget something really important. The other thing that's really important for creatives and in creative teams and innovators to me is play. Being able to play and not constantly be thinking, I've got to come up with the greatest creative line, right? That's kind of the storytelling and thinking for people to go outside and live a life, right? And play a little bit. And those are some of the nuggets that can come through when you're not, head down thinking, I must have this perfect line for this perfect brand.
Right. A lot of times when I have brainstorms with my team, there's always a core team that works on that brand, but I'll invite like even someone from reception or from another department just to sit in and just, we call it brain farting, just say shit, say stuff. And you never know because sometimes they just say something and there's a nugget of something there. You're like, hey, wait a minute. Yes. So at my past agency, we had something called juntos. If you know what that is the Benjamin Franklin way of he'd have meetings. So it started, way back in Philadelphia, where he would get random people from different walks of life, and they would pick a subject matter, and he'd just put them all together in a room and come up with ideas. So at my past agency, Peter Mayer, we would do something called juntos, which was really fun, where we bring clients from different levels. We bring people from our own agency, and we put them into different groups and send them off, and they'd come back after an hour. We'd have them investigate it further, pick our favorite ideas, send them off again, bring them back in again. I think that was it drives a lot of new way thinking. And it's good to have like one brand manager on that team because they can at least keep you within check, but also like outside thinking, comes up with new stuff. So there's a famous thing called thin slicing from Malcolm Gladwell, where he talks about just, the first thing that comes to mind, write it down. And sometimes you're instinctually coming up with things as your first instinct that could be good. So just write it down and then you can move on. But you come back to it later, you see, hey, wait a minute. There's a reason my subconscious was the first thing that came up when I was brainstorming. And you go back and revisit it, you come up with better ideas. So you're right. So it's you need to have that mishmash of different things. But also, like I said earlier, you need the fringe ideas. Some of the best ideas I've ever done in my past was somebody just saying something and they didn't think it was something important. But as a creative leader, you have to say, hey, wait a minute, that's an idea there. And I think I was talking to another friend recently where I'm like, I've noticed that some of the best ideas were things that the more junior team threw away. Sometimes they come up with these ideas and they're so excited to show this big idea, right? And I'd be like, hey, show me a couple of ideas you threw away. They'd be like, no, it was crap. I don't want to show it to you. I'm like, yes, no, just please me. Show me what you got. And you won't believe it. Half the time I'm like, no, that's the idea. Why'd you throw that idea out? You take that and you add this and do that. That could be a great idea. And that's happened so often. So I think you'll see like that's what a great creative leader does. They can come in and see the nugget of something. And then you bring that to the client, right? Again, because the clients they're the brand ambassadors, the brand manager. Their job depends on how they move products. As an objective agency, we're more about let's just give them fun stuff, clever stuff, witty stuff, things that'll get buzz, and then they can help us navigate to what's right along with the strategists. Because again, I always talk about the importance of strategists and planners. I've always felt like they were some of the most important people in our liaisons with clients because they can keep us on the right track. Because we can, as creatives, we can just be saying crazy things. I mean, the amount of ideas of helicopters blowing up and that comes up all the time. You're like, no, it's actually a PNG product. You can't be blowing up helicopters. But you never know. It might go through sometimes. Every now and then, one great idea makes it through, and you're like, wow, okay, I never thought the client would buy that, and they did, right? So,
yeah, creativity comes in sparks. So I recall reading about the thin slicing. So that's a good callback on that one. A reminder, I'd forgotten about that, but I'd never heard of juntos. So that's a new one for me. How do you spell it?
JUNTO.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm gonna have to look that up. I like that.
And I know that sounds like it's a foreign name, but actually it's like 200-300 years old. It's from Benjamin Franklin. So
that's great.
Yeah, actually reading up about him as I was doing juntos, I'm like, his story itself is phenomenal. We're not going to go into Benjamin Franklin, but a brilliant guy. I mean, like his stories we actually read from all the stuff in Paris. It is phenomenal that one of our founding fathers was, already thinking at the level of modern technology.
Yeah.
So,
well, you're definitely our first guest on the show that has made a Ben Franklin reference. So you get the prize for that.
I can do a whole Hamilton-like thing about Ben Franklin. I can do a whole musical right now.
Well, that'll have to be on our paid subscription plan if you want that.
Don't steal my idea. Whoever's listening, don't steal that idea. That's my idea.
You made a reference to this, so I have to go back and ask about it now. You touched on AI, right? You acknowledged that AI is now part of our world today. So, okay, and then in the last few weeks ago, OpenAI came out with Sora. Everybody's like wowed about the video capabilities. So, just tell us, what are your thoughts on AI's impact on agencies in the creative world? We could probably spend a whole episode on this, but just give us your first takes. What are you thinking so far? And the world is changing fast. So I realize that.
So I spent some time in Barcelona in November, where a lot of the creative leaders from across the world met. And we're all accepting now, because we got very good demonstrations of AI from different parts of the world, and it is phenomenal. I know some people are still, trepid about it. No, it's not happening. It's all about creativity and humans, and forget the rest. It's just a passing phase. My personal belief, and I could be wrong, but I've talked to a lot of creative leaders. It is here to stay. My last couple of agencies that I work with are already heavily investing in it. It is amazing in terms of the time it saves. So yes, it is coming, and it's like a big tidal wave coming in. If you're not, ready to swim in it, you're gone. So we've already used it for various things, like typing into Midjourney and DALI 3 and all that stuff. We've already used it for in-house something that would take 12 hours to design or draw or Photoshop. You can do that in seconds now, right? Like storyboards or mock-ups. We're still not doing it for final artwork, so it's already saving us a lot of production hours in the agency. I also feel like some people are ignoring its benefits in terms of helping us. It takes creativity, like we talked about earlier. It's a process. Like it takes us, like sometimes we get briefed. We spend 2 days just shooting around. In the old days, you'd go have a smoke in the balcony, come back, have a drink. You could see some alcohol bottles behind me. I don't drink during the day though. But I'm saying you would just drink and chill and figure out, and you talk stories and you come up with great ideas. I think AI is helping us bypass a lot of that. It takes 2, 3 steps to get to where we want to go with creativity. It helps us get past that idea, phase number 1 and 2, like just putting in some amazing prompts will get you kickstarted on some amazing thoughts. And yes, I still feel you need that human interpreter or the human curator of the ideas. But me personally, in the last 2 months, I've seen some phenomenal ideas from AI creativity, and we can use it not for final work, but to get us started. So I feel like if agencies are doing that already, big ups to them. But I think a lot of people are not. I've seen a lot of trepidation. I've been in a lot of meetings where they're like, no, it's bad ideas. Yes, it's not clever yet. It's not witty yet. But how much of the work you actually see is clever and witty in advertising? I would say maybe 25, 30%. The rest of them are, regular, let's do 50 versions of a billboard or 50 versions of a digital. Yeah, it give you all those ideas and you can save on all that. So if you are an agency owner or if you are working with agencies, there's a lot. I think you could chop 25, 30% of your staff and have somebody well versed in how to do AI and how to give good prompts. And I think I was telling Barb a couple of days ago, I just got back from India. I was in India all of the month of February. And even the young guys, I mean, the people between the ages of 18 to 22, they're already spending hours and hours working on AI, figuring it out. They're already tech forward more than Americans, I feel, right now, because they're already knowing this is the way of the future. So what are we going to do that? So we maybe end up outsourcing some of the work to foreign countries because they're already way ahead of us. When I was in Barcelona, I met this guy named Martin Herlin. Like he was just this. We did an entire commercial in 1 hour that was phenomenal. Like now, was it like ready to run on the air? No, but it created music, voiceovers, the spot, the editing, the characters, everything was done in 1 hour, and it looked phenomenal. Now, not ready to, it's still a year away from being worthy to run on air, but it was amazing. And I'm like, wow, like I was just amazed. And if you can look him up on Instagram, you'll see some of the stuff he's doing, and you're like, wow, this is already being done right now. So yeah, it's evolving at the speed of light. But I think by next summer, I think summer of 2025, we're going to see a lot more spots that's completely AI generated. You're going to see a lot of copy and headlines in ad campaigns that was derived from AI, and somebody took it and manipulated and made it more clever or wittier, like I said earlier. But yeah, it's a tidal wave, and if you're ignoring it, you are making a big mistake.
Yeah.
I mean, in
Yeah.
the past, we had to go through that. I remember when computers started, and then Barb, we're going to go back into the 90s where they're like, oh, this is boring. Photoshop, no, that's not going to last. Or I still remember clients asking me to do their first web page, and they're like, why would somebody go to our web page? And literally having meetings. The World Wide Web, it's a highway. I don't want to be on the super highway. And I'm like, all right, and people ignored it. And some brands were too far behind, and some brands jumped on it and they did well. So I think that's happening with AI, and I think brands are going to work with it directly in-house, or they might tap into agencies that are already having fully functional AI capabilities to help them, because it'll reduce the amount of time, reduce the amount of labor. Now, as we go to the transition period, it might not be good yet, like really smart and clever, but that's going to take some evolution, but it's here to stay. So
Yeah, I was building some Dolly Images the other day, and I'm looking at it going, "Wow, this is pretty good." It took a whole 30 seconds, right? Didn't spell the words right, but that's okay. It's going to get better for sure, right? And we
yeah,
forget a lot. There is utility for all those millions of versionings that we usually do, right? For 10 different, size attributions that we have to do and all these executions, it probably will help jumpstart some of that executional work for sure. And then maybe even, I'll be interested to see how many great big ideas that, we can kind of derive from it. That'll be interesting to see.
yeah. One
Um,
metaphor I told people was about 10, 20 years ago, we were outsourcing to like foreign countries. Now you're going to be
yeah,
outsourcing to AI, in some ways.
Yeah.
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 exactly. That's interesting.
I
Talk
mean,
about,
who
so foreign countries. I love that you told me about your travels. You've done a lot of multicultural work. What's happening out there in the world in some of your travels? You said that, everybody's ahead of us, at least the young people are ahead of us, maybe in AI and some other things. What are some of the new trends you're seeing globally?
So since COVID, there was a massive, my little bit of background going back. One of my big agencies I worked at for 6 years was Burrell, which is part of the Publicis Network. I've also worked at Uniworld Group, Fluent 360, Lapis, different multicultural agencies. So I was always staying on top of multiculturalism. And of course, in the past 4 or 5 years, it has become a big catchword. I know a lot of people are checkboxing and hiring multicultural, but the importance of that is very palpable. I mean, especially with Gen Z now, for them, it is not multicultural. It is unicultural. They believe in one world and one uniculture, right? So, yes, you have to be well versed in that if you're a brand or if you're an agency. So that's something. But I also have noticed, though, after like an initial tick up in hiring more diversity based clients and, creatives and staff, people have backed off a little bit over the last year. So I still not know where it's going to go, but I have noticed a downtick in hiring. So I don't want it to be just a checkboxing thing where people did it for a while and it's gone away. But in terms of internationally, yeah, I have noticed that people are much more, malleable now with knowing cultures and stuff. Like I said, I was in India for a month, the entire month of February, and just the fact that because of internet and stuff, the way people dressed and the way they talked and knowing about culture from what's happening in America or in England or in Poland, like I was so surprised that people are so cognizant of everything that's happening. Now, a lot of them have negativity about the entire world has gone, with politics. So I've seen a lot of nationalism has started across multiple countries, not just USA, right? India too is very nationalistic now, as well as Europe and you know like different countries. I'm not going to go into all of them, but it's become very nationalistic. So that has been a negative form because, like I said, the Gen Zs and the later millennials are much more malleable about cultures. But I feel like, yeah, it's they are looking for work. They're looking to be represented on when they see something on screen. They want to see themselves, not just a typical Caucasian couple, upper middle class. They want to see unusual people like themselves. But the biggest thing I don't like about that is a lot of times when I watch TV commercials now, it won't have a basic idea. They just have casting. It's almost like let's put a LGBTQ plus person along with a African American guy with a Chinese woman. Like it's such mishmash of people, and it looks so forced. Now I'm not saying there aren't people like that out there. There are couples like that, but it just you can see when I watch it, especially with my multicultural friends, they're like, "Oh God, they've checked every box with that commercial just to make sure," and it's like doesn't seem authentic. So again, for me, it's that authentic stories that need to come across, and people are looking for that, and people are cognizant when someone is just checkboxing. So again, I think brands should be very smart about it. I know they feel like they need to hit every target, but that's a big mistake. So your original question was like, what am I seeing with multicultural? I have seen like the world has gotten much more open to it. The next generation is so much more about sustainability, multiculturalism, uniworld. But I think brands are still on this, like they're not sure how far too deep. Because as you know, some brands have gone into it and gotten really dinged, especially if it wasn't authentic to their brands or, even starting with Budweiser, we'll not get into all that. But it's been very like traumatic for a lot of brands. So they're wary. So we need to help navigate that together. But as long as they have permission to play in certain spaces and it's authentic to their brand, they should be okay.
Yeah, a couple things that you said made me think that, for one, I think human beings have this tendency to, when you're trying to make something right, we often tend to like swing too far, right? Like, oh, like so the first time you do it, you do kind of over rotate a little bit too much on that, and maybe that's what we're going through right now. Hopefully, we'll find a good middle ground.
Yeah.
But the other thing that you said, which was interesting, is that you pointed out this weird contradiction or dichotomy, which is on the one hand, the world is getting smaller, right? Definitely, right? I mean, it's like it's more international. The community seems to someone halfway around the world can still be very up to date because of technology and the web and social media on what's going on. But at the same time, it's driving the opposite, which you pointed out also, which is like now you're also in some ways becoming more insular. So I don't know. That's a weird blend, and it's probably hard to navigate as a creative person trying to put together an ad campaign that appeals to the right audience but doesn't piss somebody else off. But you're balancing a lot, I guess, is what I'm concluding.
I mean, I came to America exactly 40 years ago, and you could have much more diverse conversations without people getting angry.
Yeah.
I know this is going down a whole different path for this podcast, but I felt like in the old days I could talk, even if I disagreed with somebody 100%, we'd have a good talk and laugh it off. But now with social media and anger, it feels like you can't have those conversations. Comedians can make jokes, even if it's about themselves. Like I've heard Black comedians get ripped for making Black jokes, and they're like, well, we're Black. They're like, doesn't matter. And it's white people complaining about them, or, like a Karen's. So it's just amazing. Like me being Indian, I've made Indian jokes and I've had someone correct me. And I'm like, okay, I was making a joke about myself, but even that offended you, fine. Okay. So it's really weird and awkward, but you know what? That's where the world is. And it's about how are people feeling, And I think one thing you threw out to me, Alec, was to see the Joe Rogan podcast, on Gen Z and millennials. I did watch that. And yes, the sensitivities are at this ultra level, and we keep nurturing those sensitivities as opposed to saying move on. And because of that, it creates even more tension. Like it begats more tension. So that's not about this. This podcast is not about human sensitivities, but it is very unusual and tough right now to be a comedian or a writer or advertising or someone who wants to push the boundaries, because you never know who you're going to upset and how you react to that upset. When people are upset, that's what the issue is. So,
yeah.
Well, I do think, going back to something you said earlier, though, that hopefully the thing that still ties us all together, though, is the human experience as told through stories. So that's got to be the thing I hope that still brings everyone together and resonates no matter what culture you are. Tell us a little bit about some of maybe your more successful, maybe one or two successful stories that you've had where you've been able to create strong buzz or strong positive reaction to a campaign. And what was that like coming up with that story?
Yeah, I mean, natural stories, right? So when I worked on Molson Coors, right, during COVID, I remember a friend of mine saying, dude, I miss going to bars. Sales were up for Molson Coors. Like people were buying Miller Lite and they were drinking at home. So it wasn't like they were not selling, but they wanted to still get buzzy, right? So I remember a friend of mine saying, dude, I miss the smell of bars. I don't care if it smelled like puke and linoleum and, month-old popcorn. I miss that smells. So based on that, as a team, we were all talking at one of my agencies, and we're like, that's funny that people miss the sports bar, the dive bar, the grandpa bar. And, back then, Gwyneth Paltrow had that whole goop, candles. And we were like, yes, we should do candles that smell like different bars. So we literally came up with bar scented candles. We had like 3 or 4 of them, and we just created a few thousand of them. But that sold out within a day, and all the money went back towards bartenders because they were struggling. And that got so much buzz. We got over 2 billion impressions, which is like Super Bowl spot impressions. And we spent less than $10,000. So it shows you that a good idea about true human stories. So to me, that's like a fun, cheap, you sat with a friend and he's like, I miss a bar. I miss nasty bars. And
Yeah.
again, who's going to light a candle in your apartment to smell like a nasty bar while you're at home drinking by yourself? That's not the point. The point was the buzzworthiness. And that story got picked up by Saturday Night Live on Weekend Update. It was on,
Cool.
Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon. They all talked about it and it got such good buzziness. And it was fun, so it shows you like a human story, just simple, that you overheard somebody at a bar can become a fun story, right? So,
Wow.
yeah, to me, that's like an idea of taking something that's in the zeitgeist of culture and just creating buzzworthiness. And now you will see there's a lot of brands doing collaborations, right? I'm just gonna make this up, but like Crocs with with cheese, like they'll a Croc that's edible. They'll do stuff like that, or there's a lot of collaborations happening that get a lot of buzz and people talk about it, and that's what people are going for now. They want to stay on top of culture. So you'll see if you read Adweek or Ad Age or any other publications,
Hmm.
there's so many fun collaborations between Puma and some food company, or it'll be some cologne with a T-shirt. Like it'll be fun little things that's being mixed and matched, and that's what people like to talk about. So
What,
that's
that's
like connecting to human stories and doing something for your brand that's buzzworthy.
That's interesting to me. Sorry, I want to ask about that. Why do you think the collaborations are so hot? Is it because brands are trying to capitalize on the audience of complementary brands? But some of these, I mean, I know you were just making it up, but I'm sure
Yeah.
some of these ideas are also meant to be a little bit on purpose unconventional, right? So
Well,
I don't know. What do you
people
think
like
is the
pithy.
driving that?
Yeah. So, again, TikTok world, fast, grammable stuff. So if you send like an influencer some fun little thing, like for example, we worked on when the movie The Batman came out a couple of years ago, we sent influencers the bat light. We only did like 5 or 10 of them. But like the influencers were like, wow, I've got a bat light, to the bat signal on the moon. But like that's so I mean, we only did 10 of them, but it got like, a million views on, different channels because people want to be like, hey, I got this or I got that, or have you heard about this? And shareable, fast, quick bites, right? So that's where the world has gone. Like people will share your brand story if it's fun for them or something that they're like, oh my God, look at this stupid thing or look at this amazing thing. Like that's where brands want to play because people will share. I mean, you would never have thought 30, 40 years ago that that a consumer is going to talk about your brand to all their friends. I mean, they probably would love that you did it, but you never did. But now people are like, if you get like your hands on something that's rare, like a one-off, I got a Fendi watch, but it has something in it, a strap from another brand, like little things like that, collaborations that people can share with each other have become buzzworthy. And I think that's what I'm talking about, like moving at the speed of culture. And I mean, there's a lot of people doing it. Not everything becomes successful, but every now and then you may come up with something amazing. Like I remember another story where, if you guys remember, this guy got lost in South America on his boat. He was out in the Pacific Ocean, lost at sea for 3 weeks. Maybe it was 2 months. I don't remember. And when he got back and he was finally found alive, they said, "How did you survive?" And he says, "All I had was a bottle of ketchup." Right? So true story, true story. So Heinz is like, wow, okay. So they couldn't track him down. They were going to give him a free ship because his ship was crashed. So Heinz is like, wow, he survived on ketchup. What a great story. Let's give him a free ship. Like maybe not a yacht, but you know what I mean? Like a fishing boat. I don't know. So they set out a whole message in a bottle to like find him. And it was all over the news. And they finally found him and they gave him like a year's supply of ketchup and a free boat, right? So but see, that is so they stayed on top of news, right? And that got again millions and millions of views. And that is what you want. You want to stay on top of, the news and stay on top of people's and stay at the tip of people's tongues. So people will be like talking about you and it's a feel good story, right? That's what it is. Again, we said storytelling. Most storytelling is feel good stories. People love talking about that, right? So yeah, I mean, there was
Yeah.
another one where I'm not sure whether you remember the guy. I think it was a Mexican American. He was just skateboarding, listening to an old 80s band and just having some, I think, Ocean Spray or something. But I don't remember the actual brands. But I remember that story. Like, wow, and Ocean Spray sent him a brand new truck filled with Ocean Spray as a gift, and that
Yeah.
got millions of views and like such good kudos for the brand. That's the kind of stuff that, again. So in the old days, people were like just by lucky they would get in the news. Now agencies and brands have people staying on top of news items hey, they mentioned us or they did that. Maybe we should tap into that and jump on that and, get some press out of that by helping this person or helping this mother or this daughter, do stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Collaborations now are everywhere. And, it used to be that you'd have to develop everything in house. You'd have to create everything. Your R&D people were the kings of it. And now, you have huge companies, LG, partnering with other competitors even to come up with collaborations. Look at the music world in collaborations, right? So I think
Yep.
we are really much more open to it. Embracing it now. So, and I love the buzzwords worthiness that you can glom onto by a newsworthy outline. So I'm gonna kind of finish up with one area that you and I have debated a bit about, right? Like I believe, I have been in companies where everything's kind of nervous or there's a lot of pressure happening, and I have said, that I think that fear is an innovation killer, right? Or, when you're in that fearful space, you don't feel free enough to create. You flipped that one around with me and you've kind of said, I like that energy. I like that a little bit of, we used to call it healthy paranoia. Talk to that. What do you think about that? What
Yeah,
makes people work?
yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people like fear is a bad motivator and people never do well. And again, I'm talking about myself and people I know. And I think that what we discussed, Barb, was like, it's a true fact that the greatest inventions in mankind's history happened during time of war. Because there was
Oh,
less time to debate it or research it. Things happen. You're like, all right, we got 1 week to do this. And I think some of the best advertising creative ideas I ever had was like when you're like, wait a minute, you only had 3 days and they're supposed to having a month to do it. And then you're like jamming on it, you eliminate all the negative ideas. You just focus on what needs to be done. So I believe, yeah, fear actually is a great motivator. I know a lot of Americans or a lot of Zen Buddhists are like, that is not what you need to do. You need to be free and just open your mind. But I personally, and a lot of people, like I said, people I know, and I know some people, like especially people who are working, we don't want to be driven by fear. I get it. But I feel like when that's like, you have a fire. Like I think like the true story, like you've never know what fire, you can talk about fire, write about fire until you've touched fire, you don't know what it feels like. So I think fear is that way too, where you're like, okay, we did get this done and now we're screwed. So you have to get it done. So I always believe that's a great motivator. And like I said, the greatest, mankind's greatest inventions have happened when there's less testing and learning. It's more like, let's just go do it. And I know we're surviving a post COVID world now where things just blew up, and people are so, scared and trepid about stuff. But I think for me, and like I said, a lot of people I know, that is a great motivator. And I think, and again, talking about globally, I travel a lot to Asia and, third world countries, which is a negative term. So I'm not going to say third world countries, but uh, it is literally, they have no choice. So they are building and doing stuff. While in America, you will test and we're like a bloated giant, like, oh, we can't do this or do that. Or when I worked on McDonald's, I remember one of my clients says, we cannot do a U-turn with McDonald's because it's a 18-wheeler on a one-way street. That's what McDonald's is. You can only turn like 10 degrees at a time. But a lot of other brands that are global that's coming in and kicking ass is because they are willing to take that risk, They're willing to do stuff. Like when I was in India last month, the young kids, they're like studying so hard, more than any kids I've ever seen study. They're studying hard. Meanwhile, I've got kids in college who barely study. They're all about sports and hanging out. Well, kids I know in India are like, my God, after school, they come home and study for 5 hours and they're taking tutorials online till like 3 in the morning. And I'm like, wow, are you guys ever going to sleep? No, that drive and energy from them to succeed. That's why if you go to most of the schools in America, especially the top schools, a lot of the students are foreign students. They're coming in and they're literally, for them, this is it or nothing else, right? They can't go back unsuccessfully. So they are burning at a different level. And to me, that is what fear brings. Also, like, hey, they can't go back. Their parents' life savings are on their 1 year or one semester they're studying here. So they give it as all. So I feel that is what's missing in America. Again, this is not a diatribe about America. I love this country. But I just feel like when I come back from foreign countries from visits, I'm always like, God, everything's so slow moving here. Like even, building a building, you have to go through all these rules and people complain about the noise. And next thing it never happens. After 10 years, the building is still not built. Meanwhile, in different parts of the world, I lived in China for a while in the 2008s. Like buildings are just coming up, roads coming up, freeways. It's all happening so fast. While here it's like, No, I don't. Has there anything major been built in Chicago in the last 30 years? Like major? No, right? Nothing major has been done. It's all been like little things here and there because nothing happens because it's so much, politics and things you have to get signed off on. I know this. Alex, like, what are you going down this path? You can cut all this out, Alex. I'm just talking about it because I'm frustrated because I love this country and I come back from foreign visit. And I'm like, nothing's happening here. The rest of the world is like, China is like on, rocket fumes, and India is like, everyone's like, there's like literally 30 million jobs in India right now. There's 1 million high rises being built right now. 1 million. You can't, there's probably 10 high rises in Chicago right now, 10. And the entire country, maybe 10,000 buildings. India has 1 million buildings right now being built. Like, it is just like this, the world. And we are just so like self-satisfied here. So again, you can cut all this out, Alec. I'm just
what I'm hearing from you is you got to stay hungry. You got to stay hungry. I'm also hearing from you, I need to put some pressure on my kids for sure, right? Healthy paranoia pressure. Yeah, I'm hearing
they
that.
Come home
right?
tonight for spring. They come home tonight for spring breaks. I'm going to talk to them about it.
Yeah. Give people tight deadlines because the longer the deadline, the longer they're going to rotate around it needlessly, right? And I think that's the magic for great creativity. Matt, you have been a blast.
Sorry, Barb. To reverse back, I mean, we talked about fear. Maybe this you can surmise with this. I think fear has been given a bad instinct. I think over the last few years, and it's not fear. It's like that anxiousness to perform. We've lost that. We're more like, we don't want to make people anxious. We don't want to, take them out of their comfort zones. To me, that's what's missing. I think like, and fear might be the wrong word, right? We just need to like drive people more. And it's okay to feel uncomfortable or it's okay to be offended and just take it as a building block. But right now we just let it overwhelm us. So don't let fear scare you. Fear should drive you. And I know some people cannot have it. So maybe the more high functioning people can navigate fear better and some people can. But I think it's a lost art to like manipulating fear to your advantage.
Yeah, well, and I would maybe say stay uncomfortable, right? Because when you're uncomfortable, that's when the growth happens. And those are your big wins, right? So, use that word, shake it off, and move on with it and keep going because that's when you'll grow. So maybe it's really looking at it from a different perspective that helps us a little bit better.
And exactly the podcast that Alec told me about, Joe Rogan talks about it. The whole shaking it off is not happening, especially with the Gen Zs. And that reporter, I wrote her name down. It was Abigail Shrier. She talks about that. She researched with a lot of psychiatrists, and psychiatrists are, they're not doing it for free. They're making money, right? So they don't mind instilling fear or dwelling in it, right? I think we need to move past it. Shake it off. You said the word, shake it off. Like, okay, fine, let's move on. We got burned. Let's put a bandage on it and keep moving. A lot of that's not being done right now. So that fear of AI, the fear of, the metaverse, the fear of, computers, the fear of data, all that has to be accepted. We need to like use that to our advantage. And I think a lot of people are not doing that yet in this country.
Yeah, I love it. You're right. I loved that segment. You're absolutely right.
I like it too, Matt. And I remember another quote that I often think about is, nothing motivates more than a deadline, right? I think it's the same concept. Some people think it just means, that's just because you're procrastinating. I don't think that's the point of it. I think the point of it is that it is the pressure of having to get something done. Sometimes that is what drives you. Then it gives you immense focus and it gives you immense drive to kind of like fit everything in and do it just as it's needed to be done. So we can capitalize on that. We can learn to capitalize on that.
All right, buddy. Thanks so much for being on. I appreciate it. It's been great talking to you. And you know what? We've solved a lot of world problems today, as well as educated on marketing and creativity. So thank you for that.
I'm going to run as a Democrat. I'm the third party against Biden. We need independent. I'll run to make America great again, right?
All right. We now sit here, folks. This is where it started.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me on, Barb and Alec, on the Marketing Share. My name is Matt Kuttan. You can see my work at mattkuttan.com or on LinkedIn. See you guys later.
Thanks very much, Matt.